Good morning, my name's James Pearson. It's my great privilege to be the Chief Executive Officer of this great city of Joondalup, arguably the most beautiful place in the world, not arguably one of the most important places in the world to be right now, in the middle of a discussion around one of the most significant challenges our modern, hyper-connected society faces. I'm very proud of the fact that this is a city which proclaims itself with reason and with aspiration to be Western Australia's, if not the nation's, capital of cyber. The city has teamed up with AustCyber and the WA AustCyber Innovation today to present this forum. It's part of National Cyber Week, and it's great to see so many familiar faces here this morning, so many friends of the city, and not just here in the room, because we have online and protected people from the Shire of Narrogin and the City of Karratha, just to name a couple of local governments in regional Western Australia who've joined us. The WA Police Force, large companies like PwC and Accenture, and my old stamping ground from Canberra, the Canberra Health Service. And that's just a sample of what the modern world looks like, of what the modern world needs to be even more of in order to work as well as it does, and in order to deliver on the expectations of the people we all in our own ways and collectively serve. The Mayor is going to speak shortly, and he's going to make the official acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all First Nations people here this morning. And may I, at a personal note, share with you that one of the activities that I got involved in very soon after I joined the city a little over a year and a half ago was to become part of the support network for the city's Reconciliation Action Program initiative. And our most recent meeting took place on Monday evening, and the vibe, if I may, in the room, the readiness and willingness of all the people around that table to find solutions and to move the city forward in its engagement with Indigenous people was something that is really uplifting. And while at the end of the day we deserve to be measured on the tangible things we do, on the outcomes that we collectively deliver alongside Indigenous people, I'm very heartened that the city is on the right track. Even though the journey will be a long one, I feel very strongly that it will be a successful one. Our audience today includes stakeholders from the local business community, all three levels of government, members of industry, representatives from Joondalup's world-class learning precinct and key city stakeholders, as I'd mentioned. And I won't steal the Mayor's thunder in terms of acknowledging all of our VIPs today, but I will give a quick shout out to Jess Shaw, who is here representing the Deputy Premier today, and we'll be addressing her shortly, because Jess has reminded me that she and I worked together in one of Western Australia's great institutions, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Western Australia. And I must say that as the former CEO of CIWA, I thought that was the pinnacle of the representation and leadership until I came here to Joondalup. Can I also recognise Jason Murrell from AustCyber, who is going to be presenting key findings from the Sector Competitiveness Plan, and we'll have a panel of industry experts to discuss the state's place in the globally competitive cyber security sector. There'll be a panel moderated by Jason, with the founder and CEO of Red Piranha, the Managing Director of Hyperfire, and the Director of the WA AustCyber Innovation Hub. The city's always had its eye on the bigger picture from its earliest days. We're the first digital city in Western Australia. The Premier proclaimed us not that long ago as the state's first innovation hub. And quite frankly, modern cities like ours have no choice but to leverage the emerging digital revolution and to work closely with public, with the community and business to give effect to that. Many of the jobs of the future don't even exist yet. We don't even know what they will be called, but here at Joondalup we are determined to welcome them, to embrace them, to play our part in creating them and hopefully we'll see the people who work in those jobs not just work in them here in Joondalup, but also raise their families and live with them here in Joondalup. More and more innovative businesses are calling Joondalup their home, and the Council recently endorsed a plan for us to become and develop an innovation precinct. The future looks very bright here in Joondalup on digital, just as the sun is shining out there, and this is one of my favourite rooms in this great city. It reminds us that the opportunities really are boundless, but we're also reminded that wherever there is light, there is also shade, and that is what a major theme of today's discussions is going to be: how we ensure that the digital future of cities and communities like Joondalup and countries like ours is a safe and secure one. And that, I think, is a discussion and a challenge worth accepting. Ladies and gentlemen, could you now make the Mayor of Joondalup, the Honourable Alpert Jacob, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much, James. Can I please begin by acknowledging all of the hard-working councillors of the City of Joondalup who join us here this morning in Councillor Russell Palufka, Councillor Christine Hamilton-Prime, Councillor Russ Fishwick, Councillor Tom McLean and Councillor Adrian Hill. To one of our guests of honour today, Jessica Shaw, MLA, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Premier and Minister for State Development, Jobs, Trade and Tourism, representing the Honourable Roger Cook, Deputy Premier of Western Australia. To Senator Fatima Payman, Senator for Western Australia, to Mr Ian Goodenough MP, our local federal member for Moore. Importantly, Mr Daniel Sims from the City of Wanneroo, CEO, who joins us here today, and of course everybody in the room as key city stakeholders, distinguished guests all, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to the final business forum for the city for 2022. And the City of Joondalup, as the capital of cyber, is very proud to be hosting or co-hosting this morning's forum, a forum that will focus on growing the cybersecurity sectors through a stronger export market. This morning's forum theme couldn't be more timely. We're all aware of the cyber attacks that have affected and also continue to affect high-profile organisations across the nation. Many of us have been directly affected by them. We have the Department of Transport out the front of our city offices, and you should have seen the queues there in recent weeks. In its 2021 Global Risk Report, the World Economic Forum identified cybersecurity failure as the fourth highest global risk in the short term, meaning over the next 1 to 2 years. By strengthening our export market in cybersecurity, we can maximise the opportunities for the incredible talent pipeline that we have here in the Northern Corridor, institutions and businesses that we have here in the room today. The City of Joondalup is eager to continue to support and grow our cybersecurity sector and to assist to export this incredible service around the world. We're proudly home to the $50 million Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Centre and the WA AustCyber Innovation Hub, which aims to grow the Australian cybersecurity ecosystem and export Australia's cybersecurity to the world, making Australia and Joondalup the leading centre for cyber education. This hub is one of only 2 academic centres of cybersecurity excellence in Australia. The Cybersecurity CRC is a collaboration between industry, government and academia, with partners including the Western Australian Government, the Australian Department of Home Affairs, the Australian Federal Police, the Australian Signals Directorate, the CSIRO and multiple universities. We are proud to be home to the largest number of cyber graduates in Australia, and ECU alone can claim 1 in 5 of all cybersecurity graduates in this country. By 2024, according to Australia's Cybersecurity Sector Competitiveness Plan, the Australian cyber sector will generate $1.4 billion in additional revenue and 7,000 additional jobs. As we all well know, they're going to have trouble even filling those jobs. I'm pleased to hear that ECU is collaborating with global tech giant IBM to deliver an industry and education internship model, one that places student talent at the heart of the industry and creates real job opportunities for local ECU students to earn as they learn. This internship program, which officially launched in August, focuses on current and emerging high-demand skill areas which are key to Western Australia's digital economy, including user experience designers, software engineers, data scientists, mobile application developers and project managers. This is further evidence of the innovation and growth which is happening right here in Joondalup in our cybersecurity sector. The City is committed to facilitating global engagement with cybersecurity as a key sectoral priority. And it's great to see Adam Bennett here today, the founder and the CEO of Red Piranha, one of our panellists for today's event. Red Piranha has its own successful internship program, which has already benefited many ECU and North Metro TAFE students and graduates. Joondalup has already proven itself as the state's first innovation hub in cybersecurity, and I'm proud to say that the City is now taking steps to develop an innovation precinct for digital and critical infrastructure. We seek to be a place where world-class institutions, ambitious startups, tech giants, and the community collaborate to solve tomorrow's problems today. Our ambition is to be a global leader in innovation and a benchmark for future generations, making the City of Joondalup and the state of Western Australia a powerhouse of technology and innovation, attracting leading talent to the City of Joondalup. Of course, this isn't something we can do alone. In fact, at best it's something that we can assist with along the way, and we're always looking to work with partners to facilitate these outcomes. This precinct will complement and work closely with the state's Australian Automotion and Robotics Precinct in nearby Neerabup, and again an acknowledgement to the team from the City of Wanneroo who join us here today. This precinct will support autonomous and remote operations and robotic systems and equipment. And next month we're excited to be partnering with West Tech Fest to deliver a day dedicated to cybersecurity, to robotics, to data science and artificial intelligence here in Joondalup, Cybotics AI. Cybotics AI Day will showcase the best Australia has to offer in emerging technology across cybersecurity, robotics, data science and artificial intelligence. Those in attendance for this year can hear from leaders of top companies such as Amazon Web Services, Scalata Ventures and Fastbrick Robotics, and more as well on how your business can benefit from adopting new technologies from these four key industries. Indeed, announcement today, the City would like to offer everyone who's joined us here today a discounted ticket to attend, and I do encourage you to speak to the West Tech Fest team who are exhibiting in the foyer to arrange your discounted ticket straight after this morning's event. As always, of course, our economic development and advocacy team at the City of Joondalup are help should any of our businesses need assistance. I'll just ask them to raise their hands quickly if they can. So if there's any area that you require assistance from us as a city, keep an eye out for the people with their hands raised. In closing, I look forward to hearing today how growing the cybersecurity sector through a stronger export market will help us all work together to strengthen Joondalup's position as the capital of cyber. Thank you all again for supporting the event here today, and if I don't get an opportunity to do so later, wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy and prosperous 2023. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I invite Jess Shaw, MLA, the Parliamentary Secretary, to the stage to address us, just to put the pressure on you, Jess, you are going to be standing between us and breakfast. Breakfast will be served straight after Jess's address. We will have time to eat, and then after breakfast, around about 10 to 9 or so, I'll invite Jason Murrell from AustCyber to join the stage. Jess, apart from being an alumnus, I should say, of the West Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is of course the member for Swan Hills in the State Legislative Assembly, and she's Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Premier with one of the longest job titles in the government: State Development, Jobs and Trade, Tourism, Commerce and Science, all of which matter a great deal to the City of Joondalup and the community here. And before entering politics, as I guess you would understand, Jess had a successful career in the private sector as an executive in the energy industry. And the important thing about that is that Jess understands business. And that's a very important quality in a politician, in my view. Jess, welcome to the stage.
Anju, thank you for that very warm welcome. It is lovely to see my old boss this morning, and yeah, it was a fantastic experience at CIWA, and certainly gave me a fabulous set of networks and connections into the business community, which endure to this day, and certainly do inform the work that I do in the West Australian Parliament. Could I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I do respect their continuing culture and connection to the land and waters of this place, and the ongoing contribution of Aboriginal culture and peoples to the wonderful city of Joondalup. The lake that listens, I understand, is the Aboriginal name for Joondalup, which when I heard that, I thought that was beautiful. And certainly in the tourism portfolio, something that we're very keen to explore further as one of the primary attracting qualities of this region as a tourism destination, in addition to an IT centre of excellence. Could I acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Senator Fatima Payman, Ian Goodenough MP, I think Mark Folkard was listed to join us. I'm not sure if he's here, but my state colleague, member for Burns Beach, Mark Folkard, and of course City of Joondalup councillors who have joined us today. I am absolutely delighted to be here today as Minister Cook's Parliamentary Secretary, who does have the longest job title in the state government. I want to communicate just how fundamentally important cybersecurity is to Western Australia. I last night flew in from leading the Western Australian delegation to the B20 in Indonesia, and in fact it's lovely to see Adam Bennett here this morning, who was riding shotgun with me over the last 4 days at the B20, which is the business community's lead event into the G20, which we know is underway at the moment. And the three themes of the B20 conference were health infrastructure, energy transition and digitisation. The recognition at the B20 discussions was that the first two of those things can't happen without digitisation, and digitisation is essential to achieving equality. It's essential to enabling small business. I wasn't aware of this, but in Indonesia there are 64 million small businesses employing 97% of that population. And it's true to say that small business right the way around the world is the driver of economic growth, and digitisation is what enables that growth. Digitisation is what connects people, connects businesses within countries and around the world, and I don't think there's ever been a more important time for us to be connected and to recognise the interdependence that we have as a state, national and global community. And that certainly came through at the B20 discussions. But of course, for digitisation to be successful, we have to have confidence in it. And that is why cybersecurity is so important, because without confidence in digitisation, we will not see its enabling potential realised. Just 2 weeks ago, the Honourable Claire O'Neill MP, Federal Minister for Home Affairs and Cybersecurity, was on ABC News Breakfast reiterating that cyber is a core national security focus for the Australian government. The impact of cyber attacks is felt by individuals in the community, all levels of government and, of course, businesses. A single incident can have a devastating impact. The Australian Cybersecurity Centre's 2021-22 annual threat report indicated that last financial year, cybercrime reports increased by 13% to over 76,000. The same report highlighted the rise in impact to Australian businesses, with the average cost per cybercrime report rising by 14% to $39,000 for small businesses, $88,000 for medium businesses and $62,000 for large businesses. As we all know, the recent examples of Optus and Medibank compromising the personal data of millions of Australians serves as a timely reminder to us of the far-reaching consequences of cyber attacks. In this context, it's crucial to have a focus on the security capabilities that are needed in the economy. In 2017, the Western Australian Government invested $1 million to establish the WA AustCyber Innovation Hub. This successful collaboration with ECU, AustCyber and the City of Joondalup is driving cybersecurity initiatives and preparedness. In 2021, we invested a further $1.2 million in the hub, ensuring it can continue its highly valued service delivery. In 2020, the government invested $1.8 million to establish our first cybersecurity operations centre in Western Australia to significantly improve visibility of cyber threats to our government agencies' networks and our ability to detect and respond to cybersecurity incidents. Alongside ECU, the government is also partner in the Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Centre, a national research initiative bringing together universities, industry and government to improve national capability in cybersecurity, research, development and commercialisation. Despite the challenges we face, with increased collaboration across industry, small business and government, our joint cybersecurity future and the digital opportunities before us remain bright. Diversification of our state's economy is a priority for this government. The creation of new industries and increased participation of WA businesses in diversified supply chains will build our resilience to global volatility, grow our economy and deliver high-value jobs. Western Australia's cybersecurity sector has a key role to play, particularly as Western Australian businesses continue to transition to more digital technology and operations. Investment in this sector supports existing businesses and accelerates emerging businesses to create new jobs and new industries. It builds resilience across business, government and among individuals. It's vitally important that we have these discussions and hold events like this one to connect industry and government to grow our collective awareness and action in this critical sector. I'd like to congratulate AustCyber, the City of Joondalup and the WA AustCyber Innovation Hub for delivering this event and working to protect and empower our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. And I have to say the speeches are getting more and more efficient as well as effective. So breakfast is now going to be served. Please enjoy, please network. Don't know if we exchange business cards these days, but do whatever you need to do to make those connections that make the magic of business happen. We'll be back in about half an hour to hear from Jason Murrell from AustCyber and our panel, and a very special event at the end of that. We're going to be announcing the Cyber Security Awards. So a lot to look forward to still. Enjoy breakfast and we'll talk soon. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce the Group Executive of AustCyber, Jason Murrell. Jason's going to talk about our key theme today, growing the cybersecurity sector through a stronger export market. And that's a critical aspect of what we're about here and today, because Australia is a country of some 25 million people, economy of around about $1 trillion, middle-ranking and growing nation. But we've always recognised, haven't we, that Australia's success and prospects for growth depend so much on trade. And over the years that trade has moved from being in commodities, tangible things that we can pick up, that we can feel, that we can put in furnaces and turn to other things. But now increasingly, on top of that great industry and industries, we're getting into the realm more and more of professional services, of packets of electricity, charging of electrons, charging across the world in all directions. But as the great trading nation, I'm very confident that we can make a success of that possibility and potential as much as we have done over our more traditional export industries. And Jason's been a long-time supporter of Australian startups for over 2 decades. He helped launch Cyber Aware, most recently working with CyberHive and contributing to the platform 6 Clicks. I'd love to understand where these names come from. I'm sure that there's a name-generating program that you can get through Google for a startup. And after Jason's presentations on the key findings of the Sector Competitiveness Plan, he's going to moderate a panel discussion on the state's role in the global cybersecurity industry, and I hope, like me, you'll be looking out for mentions of the city and opportunities that the city can take advantage of. I'd now like to welcome Jason to the stage.
Thank you, James. That was a great welcome. I haven't had one like that so far. In Melbourne on Monday, we were in a dungeon at the basement when Michael opened with the Minister, Claire O'Neill. We went to Sydney, it was a bit brighter and a little bit higher, and then we end up here. So I fear now for Adelaide and Canberra that they are not going to be able to pull this off. Thank you also to Albert and Jessica. Some of the points raised obviously fit nicely into what we're going to talk about today with the AustCyber's been around since 2017, so it's been a while now. And although the cybersecurity industry is quite young, there's been businesses, and Adam's been referred to, Hyperfire, we're going to have a panel after this. There are a lot of cybersecurity businesses here in Australia, but they're not that well known. We heard the name IBM come out before, and we hear about the big names like Microsoft and the like, but we've got businesses here in Australia that punch well above their weight. And I think that one of the things we want to do with AustCyber, now merged with Stone and Chalk, is to actually make sure we give everyone an even chance in the market, not just here but also exporting. One of the things that we're here to do is to grow, export and educate the market. So AustCyber is very much a central hub of bringing that all together. I'm glad also that you're allowing a Melburnian to come into WA. I'm not used to that. I haven't been here since before COVID, so it's nice to see we're welcome back. Flying in though last night, I did have something come up on my phone saying that international roaming is available, but I didn't notice that the border had been sawed off yet or anything like that. You hadn't floated that far in the Indian Ocean. Yeah, with the Sector Competitiveness Plan, a couple of numbers that sort of stood out for me when I looked at it, which I actually wasn't aware of too, was that the cybersecurity sector here will bring this year $2.4 billion GDP into the Australian economy. But that's only marginally higher than what it was in 2020, which was $2.2 billion. So we haven't had a massive increase over that time. And with COVID was sitting in between, I was expecting that might have gone up with people working remotely, cybersecurity services required more. I think it talks to that point that we probably don't do enough to actually support our own local industry here. So that's one point of the report that really stood out to me. The interesting thing, and Jessica touched on it before, was about the medical sector. So we're actually, in cyber, a larger employer than the medical sector here in Australia. So there's a couple of points where we're actually probably, again, punching above our weight, but we've got a lot of room for improvement on that. The sector here actually look, what have we seen in the last couple of months? I started, thanks to Stone and Chalk and AustCyber back in mid-September, and in my first week, on that Thursday, the Optus hack actually occurred. We look at it always that the big banks and the telcos generally are pretty well protected, but Jessica mentioned about small to medium employment. In other countries, Australia is the same sort of number. It's around 97% of all Australians are employed by a small to medium-sized business. So, yes, the big banks look after themselves. And part of that equation that really annoys me is that, yes, they do get hundreds or thousands of attacks per minute, but they're also the least likely to actually go and use an Australian business for cybersecurity purposes or test it in their own environment. So we end up having to often go offshore to actually prove our products, and then we have to come back here because now we've earned our stripes offshore. They must be trustworthy. Let's use them now. You know, that we've gone offshore, shown that we can do what we're supposed to do, and then come back the other way. In this year's plan, and there is a brochure, I think, on there where you can QR code and get the SCP, and you can actually read through it. But the main thing that we're looking at in this critical time is the sustainability of this industry as well. We really need to look at something where we support businesses. Not many side businesses make it out of the blocks firstly. That scale-up part and then that part of export and all the other bits you need assistance with is what AustCyber is here to actually help with. And we will actually, again, with the Stone and Chalk backing, be able to actually take you all the way through to the end, like VC funding and all the other bits and pieces that are required. It's pretty easy, really, to do startups. I've done many, as mentioned in the open. And the last 3 startups with weird names that were picked out of a hat were just, yeah, well, I'll do. The 6 clicks one was actually for GRC, which is governance, risk and compliance. Only 6 clicks to actually get your governance, risk and compliance sorted. Cyber Aware, we were lucky to get that domain name, to be fair. Cyber Awareness was an awareness platform. And Cyber Hive, I don't know about that one. I wasn't involved in the naming of that one. But that was actually almost like a fire drill for cybersecurity, where you basically can experience a ransomware attack in a safe environment and then you're protected, but you go through the mechanism like a fire drill, but for cybersecurity, so you know what to do when an attack actually occurs. And the education piece is something which is key here. So both from getting cyber professionals, where we're going to have a shortage of about 3,000 by 2026. I think that number's probably unders now. When we've done this report, obviously now we've had these attacks that have occurred with regard to Optus and Medibank. Other businesses are now going to look at themselves and say, should we be doing more? Do we need to employ someone? That fear is going to mean that people are going to look in the market and try and find more talent. That's going to be difficult. The other aspect we have there, obviously, is that the skilled migrants aspect of it as well, making it difficult for them to come in. We're going to, in the short term, need skill from overseas to come in, both from filling that gap, but also mentoring the younger people that are going to come through. So we need to fill there. Now, the way we do have an opportunity at the moment to probably add about $800 million into that sort of cybersecurity revenue over the next few years. One of the main things we can do is probably just do the support research, the innovation and growth. So R&D grants, and I have utilised them before. One of the businesses I did prior to this was actually a whiskey business, a whiskey startup called Starwood Whiskey. We used R&D grants almost exclusively to get through that initial period. We started in August 2007, and don't know if anyone remembers 2008, but that wasn't the best time to be starting a business, right? So we hit this wall where people had put their checkbooks back in their pockets and we had to get creative. The R&D grants, because there had never been large-scale whiskey made in Australia, we could actually use that. And similarly with our cyber businesses, not many people have done or are doing what needs to be done in cybersecurity, being such a new industry, and R&D grants should be made easier and easier to access and easier to actually apply for. They're a great way of actually starting up these businesses and getting them going, and it definitely will be an R&D project if you're starting a cybersecurity business, because with that ever-evolving threat and the changes that happen with that, it's obviously R&D, right? So there's a no-brainer there. ARC grants as well. So we've got to look at other funding methods, not just from government, but also from these larger corporates I spoke about. Besides sandboxing, that can be enough sometimes for a side business to say, can you just test my product inside your environment? But if they can also put some money alongside that as well, obviously that's going to help. And just make it easier. I think applying for money in Australia is, and having gone through the process a few times, so hard. And it's because it is federal and then you're dealing with different states, different programs. So again, one of the things we're doing is looking to bring everything together. Cecily here does a great job with the WA node, and we're looking at that national expansion to connect everyone. It's because if you're going to be attacked in a cyber attack, they're not going to look up your postcode and go, let's go WA, bang. It's just basically, we've got this Optus database, we're going everywhere. So unlike COVID, we just can't close our borders down and stop a cyber attack. WA can't say, look, we'll just close the border and we can't get attacked. So we need to work collaboratively with this situation and make sure that we actually all work together to protect the country. And so that's a key thing. With the export one, this is another tricky one. As I touched on before, often we need to go offshore, prove our stripes, then come back and everyone in Australia goes, you're cool now because you're selling over in the US or in India or you're in Southeast Asia, you're somewhere in the world, proven, come back. Has to be the other way around. We have to support here. Now, the government talks a lot, and not just at state level, but also federally, that we do 30% procurement for local businesses, and often that New South Wales have this rule. But then if it's a bit difficult to procure, then we'll just change that a bit and we just adjust, and it doesn't end up happening. So that's the other part of it. We need to go and actually buy local first and support local and bring businesses together as well. So there's other side businesses, let's all bring them together and they can go as a full package in, rather than individually trying to do it, because as a cyber person, you're often good at cyber, but you're not good at that sort of sales and marketing and all the other aspects that are actually required in business. So we need to do more on that part as well. It's good to do study tours and go and do these, going over to other parts of the world. But again, we need to collaboratively go there and make sure that these cybers are actually meeting with key people, VCs and the like over there. Just don't take a group and say, here's a whole group of Australian cyber companies. Be more specific and more targeted with how we do it. I'd rather take smaller groups overseas, 3, 4 people rather than 10, if they're targeted and meeting the right sort of people and they're right to pop. So we've got to know where they are on that journey as well. Attracting talent. This is a difficult thing, I think, and it starts at school. The cybersecurity should be in the curriculum alongside learning your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s. Cybersecurity has to be there. Kids are getting access to computers and the internet so early these days. Parents are often throwing a phone to keep them occupied while they go off and do something. I often see, here, have a phone or have an iPad. What do they have access to then? We don't throw the keys to the car to the kid and say, knock yourself out. Go for it. We take them through lessons, 120 hours or whatever the case may be. But they also see us driving a lot as they're growing up, so they get the idea of how a car works. Our parents, like my mum's here today, she never taught me about cybersecurity. I had to learn that myself. I'm teaching her about cybersecurity. Teachers at school, they don't know about cybersecurity. So we need to teach these kids and also show them that's a path and a way to work. Just as being a doctor or a lawyer or any other thing or any sort of trade, we need to make that a pathway that kids can say, I can gravitate toward that and that's where I want to go. So we have to start that earlier and start at school and create that pipeline early. Okay, so besides it being embedded, because I reckon as soon as you teach kids about, and we're still, somewhere in Australia is going to have to help me out, and we've been asking it all the way along, the Slip, Slop, Slap campaign for skin cancer was probably one of the best ones ever run. But how do we do that for cybersecurity and get a campaign out that way as well? So steal the idea, come up with whatever you need to, but even if we just did a password manager or passphrases, multi-factor authentication, updates when available, all 3 of those are free. And if we could just get that message through to the general populace, it's going to protect a lot of people. Don't jump on free Wi-Fi anytime, but you can if you want to choose your own adventure. But But we don't need to be doing that sort of thing. Just be wise. We just need to, if we get the basics in place and that foundational stuff there, even if someone gets your password, if you've got MFA, multi-factor authentication as that second layer of protection, you're a lot better protected. Okay, so we just need those basic messages, and then we can build off that. If we get the basics right and get that message out, then we can build upon that. What else do I want to cover? A lot of stuff before the panel comes up, so I'm going to make these ones a bit quicker because the forecast revenue growth is only 5.5% for Australia, which even compared, I think the average against our international peers is 9.9%. So that's well under where we need to be. Okay, so we're going to fall further behind unless we address these sort of key areas. The limited startup support is a key thing. We got to do something more to actually support these businesses. The Canadian and Israeli startup industries are 300 times bigger in funding wise than what we are in Australia. Now, Israel is a country of less than 10 million people. We're like 26 million people. They do identify talent, and to be fair, Israel does have compulsory service, but what they do on the cyber front is they actually identify talent around grade 6, year 7, and they put them through a different program. So when they hit that compulsory service, instead of doing 2.5 years, I think it is normally, they do about 5.5 years, but they'll be working red team, like in the army. When they get out there, they get into a program where they'll get a startup started in a sandbox at a telco or a bank or something like that. And 30% of the world's unicorns, billion-dollar companies for cyber, actually come out of Israel for 10 million people. So there's models around the world we can look at that we can actually use, but even if we just start the basics underneath that, it's going to be useful. The government also, their funding has decreased from 9.8 billion in 2019 to just 7.5 this year. So why are we going backwards in funding for something which is so important? With the 3 startups I did prior, the first one, we didn't know where to go to actually get money. So it's like, we've got a startup, where do we go? Who do we talk to? Is it a state? Is it a federal? Is it a program? Is it that? With AustCyber and with Social, we're going to make that process a lot easier and not hit microphones. You want to make a process that's simple. And what happens is when you're busy doing your business, the time it takes out of your business to actually fill in some of these forms, you might be out of business by the time you finish them. That has to be made easier. The other part is the lack of export access. Now, it's been touched upon. The location and the placement of Perth and WA and this region is so good for getting into key markets. Why don't we utilise that? Everyone keeps thinking, and it's not just here, but across Australia, we'll go to America, we'll go to the UK, and they're saturated. You don't land in San Francisco and be seen. You just get lost in a wave of other businesses because everyone thinks the same. We'll just go to Silicon Valley and we'll be successful. Our businesses, with the sovereign capability and everything we have here to get into the Middle East, to get into Asia and other parts of the world, we're a better place to do that. So why don't we do that more? Get smarter about where we're actually looking to go. Does our business fit where? And making that clearer as well is going to be a key thing. Firms here also, cyber firms only export about 50% of them only export overseas. So we've got 50% of our cyber businesses here probably slaving away trying to sell here and really struggling. And COVID wouldn't have made that any easier. Selling off Zoom or trying to pitch your product that way is quite a difficult thing to do, if anyone's tried to do it, and I definitely have. The workforce shortages don't just affect businesses now, but they also affect startups later on. Most people that end up in a startup have worked in some form of ICT or some business which is related, seen that they've been stuck in a company and go, I could do better than that. And then they go and come up with an idea and they go out from there. So if we don't fill that pipeline of actually more skilled people, we probably cut off the opportunity for those people to then go and create businesses, that then go and employ more people, etc. The other thing is that the threats worldwide obviously are only getting bigger. Now, with most of our data now being out there and the criminals having all this access to all our personal data, that's just going to up the level of attack. So people have now got more Australian data, which is getting shared on the dark web, which will increase the attacks which will come into the country. So we need our cybers to be that first level of protection, and they understand the market here better than anyone else. The Australian market is different in a lot of ways, not just because of the size and the spread, but just the way we act. We are probably more trusting than a lot of other nations as well. So if someone asks us to do something or click on a link or do something, we tend to trust first and ask questions later, whereas other countries are the other way around. So we need to look at those sorts of bits as well. The regulations, we've got the critical infrastructure bill, foreign investment reforms, all those sorts of things. So they're all playing a part as well. The critical infrastructure bill should have prevented some of the stuff that's happened recently. Obviously, it's not being enacted quick enough. The fines and penalties might be one thing, but I don't think that's enough to drive these businesses. It might not be big enough. So we're going to still continue to face these skill shortages. What we can do to sustain this pipeline is actually have more of this sort of conversation. You go away and actually start talking about it. Cybersecurity should be spoken about every day. should be the first thing you think about when you get up in the morning, what is with me, and usually keeps me awake at night as well. But we need that to just be always front of mind. The first thing you think before you do anything, before you click anything, open anything, read anything, think about from a cyber security and safe point of view. I mean, with Stone and Chalk and AustCyber, I said we want to transform and have a sustainable tech-driven economy here in Australia. We want to encourage businesses and entrepreneurs and make that a cool pathway and something you should be doing, and not something like be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an entrepreneur. And we're making guardrails and a pathway for people to actually be able to do that. So it's actually looked upon as a real career and not something which is very risky and you could lose everything. What's the first thing you think of when you think of an entrepreneur? They think loss, fear, 1 out of 100 maybe make it or something like that. We want to up those numbers and make that a lot better as well, especially in cybersecurity. And with these companies, we need to have cybersecurity baked in from the start. You need, when you start a company, to have cybersecurity in from the beginning, not bolted on later on. If you ever go and raise capital and the first thing now VCs start checking is what your cybersecurity posture is. And if you don't tick that box, you don't get them, so that's key as well. Okay, that's enough of me probably scaring everyone. I want to invite the panel up now. What I'm going to do, the magicians at the back, as I wander away from here and go over there, they're going to flick me to this mic over here, so hopefully it works. No, it'll work. They're professional. So now I'll get to sit down and I'll get to invite the panel up. So this is going to be a good panel. Adam Bennett's only been mentioned 3 times today, which is actually pretty light on for Adam Bennett, because Adam Bennett gets mentioned a lot. Don't you, Adam Bennett? He's the founder and CEO of Red Piranha. Please welcome him up to the stage. Tim Jones, who should be mentioned more, and I'll make sure I mention you a few more times. Tim Jones, Managing Director of Hyperfire. And Cecily Rawlinson, very important for us over here. She's the Director of our AustCyber Innovation Hub, so probably give her the warmest welcome. There you go. You got a bigger clap than Adam. That doesn't happen often. No. Yeah. Okay, so off the back of that, I think I'm going to have agreements from the team with most of the stuff I said I would expect, but I'd actually like to hear your opinion if it differs. I doubt it would too much. You'll go harder than me, won't you?
I'm surprised they let me up here.
Yeah, that's what I'm surprised too, actually. Have we got a censoring button at the back? And so the question first is, Australian cybersecurity firms derive less revenue from export than other comparable international firms. So we're basically doing, what is it, Sector receives approximately 17% of its revenue from exports currently. Less than half the UK's 42%. So for everyone on the panel, and I'll start at Cecily and probably go back this way if that's okay. Why do you think this is the case?
There's no real support. Oh, you stayed back.
No,
sorry,
there you go.
I was reading it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, there's no real support. Sorry, Cecily. We've been talking about this all morning.
I know. That's why I didn't want to go to you first.
Yeah.
No one else will get a chance.
When you're building a startup, it's easy to get some funding for an initial startup, but there's no real scale-up support, okay? So when you're building a business, it's not just about the technology development. You need to productise that technology. And so a lot of the expense post-building the technology is in those support structures, you know, support teams, even the marketing collateral. And they're talking earlier about what's wrong, why is it different is when you're going to export, and Red Piranha is quite fortunate in some ways, but it's quite scary in other ways. And AustCyber have been around only a few months. Red Piranha just opened its doors, and Australia and Indonesia are signing a free trade agreement. And one of the 4 pillars in that was defence and cybersecurity. And Australia looked around, and out of the 300, I think then there was about 250 cyber companies in Australia. It's now like 400.
Almost 300 log on the platform.
Yeah, almost 300, but only a small fraction of those were actually making technology. They were all advisory companies, and we were one of the first making an infrastructure product. So we had a Bradbury moment where the Australian government said, quick, we need to push an Australian company up there, and we literally had our doors open for 3 weeks. So here we were setting up a serviced office in Perth, getting pushed into this international deal with Indonesia. And one of the first things they say to you in that environment was which local government departments, who do you work with in your own state? And so we've been around a few years now, and still to this day we don't have one state West Australian contract.
Serious?
Serious. We work for governments all around the world, other state governments here in Australia, but not one contract in WA.
Who'd you upset?
That makes you upset, doesn't it?
Well, so, who did you upset though? You must have upset someone.
Yes, probably a few people. But so there's your problem right there, right? If we need to build this capability out, it's now a critical infrastructure problem in its own right, a national security issue. I mean, the ECU has determined that there's over 200 different roles in cybersecurity now. If we're only going to support service companies like pen testing and compliance, you're only going to knock off a couple of those roles. We need to be building out a depth, an engineering capability that then can support the rest of the economy. And so you're only going to get that by having a diversified group of companies actually acting. So if we don't support them here on the ground, it just makes everything twice as hard, because you're always going to get, when you go for a job, it gives you references for the next job. So you've got that catch-22 thing going on. And there's nothing more embarrassing or a loss of face when you're talking to the Indonesian leaders and they're like, which departments are you using in your own state? And you've got to talk around it. And that's quite a constant thing and a constant theme that I see in the industry. And sorry, Cecilia.
That's all right. Adam Bennett. No, I think really good points, and I think we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the local procurement work that the WA Hub is trying to support in partnership with WA Government to try and foster some of this growth. But I think one of the reasons perhaps that, and I think Adam mentioned it, is the fact that most of our cyber companies are service-based, not products. So it's really hard to scale service-based businesses. So I think that's one of the reasons in Australia that we haven't seen that growth that we could have. And I think the other, we've also talked a lot about personal relationships and trade delegations, you mentioned earlier, Jason. And I think with COVID, we've been one of the most isolated countries. So yes, we've had that dramatic digital transformation and we've seen that growth internationally, but we haven't been able to build the relationships necessary to access those markets. I was on a panel with Jitsi at Indonesia Connect a few weeks ago with Richard from Adam's team, and we were talking about just the scale of Indonesia as a market on our doorstep, but we're only just rebuilding those relationships now. And the scale of digital transformation we've seen in Indonesia, and Jessica mentioned with the B20, that's a huge opportunity for Australian cyber communities now. So it's how do we actually access that now and rebuild those relationships and use that as an opportunity as opposed to, oh, it's too hard to scale right now.
Tim, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, sure. We're less than 2 years old. We were actually born in COVID. So from our perspective, we didn't really have the choice to leave, let's face it, leave WA. So we had to make it work here, and we were lucky enough to be able to make sales to, in fact, our first sale was to Venues West, a WA government department. We've since sold licences to a couple of other WA government departments, which is great. And that's exactly what we needed at that time of our development. There's a lot of support around it, and I'll share some of that a bit later, but really what startups need is sales and support from the local economy, the local market. So we were lucky enough to be able to make those sales, and as Adam said, our assumption was that we needed reference sites here, then to be able to go over east and international, because that is the first thing they ask you. It's who else is using you and who in your home market is using you and what are they saying?
Because that's interesting, because the thing is that our products are well suited to, obviously not just here, but also for export. So if you could make one change right now to supercharge that, and for the export market more particularly, like just after getting proven here locally, what would you suggest is the best way to get ourselves out over there and known from an export point of view? Do you think that it is that getting known here first, or what do you think the key is?
It definitely helps. You're up against companies from infrastructure. Tim and I actually in that same similar infrastructure, different products. We actually are sitting on a gold mine here in a different industry. And I'd like to think that Red Prona maybe inspired a little bit of that with the whole can-do attitude, because we also had Sapien come out of ECU on that, and all three companies are actually in an infrastructure play. And that's actually quite remarkable. That's an industry in its own, being born here. And
because most tend to be SaaS-based, you know,
well,
like a lot, if it's going to be
right.
a product, but to actually have some physicality around what you're doing.
That's right. And so what you are seeing is the sort of the birth of an actual industry. And we talked about that 200 different roles in cybersecurity. If you look at the Australian federal government, I'll go back to the opportunity piece that Cicely talked about. The Australian federal government spends about $8 to $9 billion with a prime in its IT infrastructure in federal departments. So out of that, about $3 to $4 billion of that is in our infrastructure type product. If we go back, so you can do your own math there, I'm not going to blow your minds, even if just in Australia doing less infrastructure. Now you go up to Indonesia, they're building 10 cities, including a new capital city, and we could be pitched as a prime. So you can start to see the potential here in a Perth market specifically, but an Australian market. Now we worked out, I think Glenn and I were talking a while ago back, about how many jobs that might create every $100 million, about 3,000 cyber jobs. We would then have a multiplier effect where this would also be in partnership with places like North Metro and South Metro TAFE, ECU, the education departments. You would have people travelling here to study a specific type of cyber security. And we're talking about a really in demand globally. So we talk about that export potential, what can we do? Well, if we can support that industry, it'll export itself. The other thing, and Jason, you made an interesting point in your opening speech, focusing in on key markets. And we've done a lot of lessons learned here, a lot of pathway emissions with the government. A lot of wasted tours. No, they're not. They're great. They're fantastic. Key markets based on political collaboration. When Red Piranhas, I've always had a collaborative approach to the whole platform, to the whole business, and we work with partners generally as we're a partner-first business, right? But even when travelling to Indonesia, they want to do business with us. They want to do it with us more than Korea or more than America or more than... There's a political will to make this relationship work. So it's not just about us exporting a product, it's about us collaborating on joint capability build-out, because all countries are in that same position of trying to build out cyber security capability, really deep capability. So we've got this political will already there in places. They're seeing AUKUS as well with India now. India has a massive amount of engineers, but actually a very small capability in cyber security. So they're also interested, particularly in the defence, and we do a lot with defence now, they're interested in partnering to help build out that collaboration, and they obviously have the engineering capability to help train our engineers. So focusing in on key markets can be a really good way to narrow that effort, that energy, and use that political will and that relationship that Australia has, because we are seen as brothers and sisters of these nations, and they're willing to work with us over the other nations. So I think there's a real good opportunity there. And if you go back to my other point about the Australian federal government and their spend on our infrastructure, imagine if you start really tapping into 5% of these markets, what that does for this state. You're talking about diversification of economy, but you're also building out a national capability of specialised engineers, not just pen testers, not just GRC people, but I'm talking about engineers who can track the threats and write code that goes into other products and other technologies to protect, and then those staff are flying back through to our banks, our teachers, and all the other businesses in the economy, building out a capability, essentially.
Just to add, I think one of the things that the Australian global brand is really strong, but we need to link that to the things that we're already recognised as being good at, and we have that trust as a nation. People want to work with us, but we also need to demonstrate and market our competence in cyber. I don't think people realise the cutting-edge technology that's being spun out of institutions in Western Australia. Our panellists are testament to that. And so being able to clearly communicate that, yes, we have this amazing sovereign competence and this can benefit you, I think is a really strong thing that we could do to revolutionise how we're communicating about cyber as an industry.
Yeah, it's just not known here first and then overseas as well. It's just we're just falling on deaf ears. But hopefully these latest attacks might change that. Tim, do you want to add?
Yeah, I can tell you the story of our first international sale as an example of where we think the supercharging could happen. So there is already some support there, the likes of AustCyber, AustTrade, who are very good at supporting startups and scale-up. And the story of our first international sale was going on a trade mission to RSA conference in San Francisco, sponsored by and subsidised by AustCyber and AustTrade. So among other things, we were introduced to a bunch of VCs. We did what they call speed dating with VCs, proper American cyber VCs. And also, as happens on these trade missions...
You were drinking?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is kind of part
that
of it.
happens on those trade missions.
You meet other Australian organisations, and one of the Australian organisations we met was a managed security service provider who we ended up partnering with on our return to Australia. Their first sale was to an organisation that was multinational, and we deployed in Australia and then into New Zealand. And from our perspective, this is how things happen organically. From our perspective, maybe supercharge the services that are already there, the facilities that are already there to help these things happen on a bigger scale.
And that's one of the things I want to do with AustCyber, like since starting that, is to actually basically be that matchmaking piece that actually lines all that up. Because we have so many cybers around here, and they're also not often aware of what everyone else is doing or where they could actually fit in. So that's one of the things we're looking to build, is so you actually have that. So exactly what you're speaking about is we can put together a package of services to go and be a holistic Australian solution, both here and then overseas, so fit for purpose, and can marry up as required and bring that into the system. So we work better collaboratively here to help here, but also we can actually help with export and be more fit for purpose, rather than it has been very much the case. And we're still a very young industry that we tend to have to go out by ourselves, and we're trying to pitch our service rather than a full package suite of services. So that's something we will definitely do. So it's actually good to hear that on here.
I think the other thing you mentioned was, unfortunately, the large-scale cyber attacks that have happened recently have raised these issues into the boardrooms of Australia. Previously, I think all of the cybers shared the issue of it's not a board level, the board doesn't understand or hasn't been told about cyber risk. It's an IT issue, but the IT departments don't have the budget because the boards don't understand the cyber risk. So it's been this kind of catch-22 scenario that seems to be opening up a bit now and unleashing bigger budgets.
Now, this is going to be probably, I'm just looking at questions here as I'm going here, but this one always is one that's close to my heart as well, because it's as a sidebar, but I'll come back to this, but what impact is the lack of gender diversity doing to the Australian cyber industry, and how do we compare to other markets? Because we've been doing this week, we did Melbourne, Sydney, and then we had AWSN did a really good session, so I'm not sure if you can still go back if you're online or even in the room here and go back and look at that session. And diversity, I'd like to add too, in Sydney yesterday for the education piece, we have neurodiversity as well. And it's people from, we talk about the skills shortage and bringing people in from overseas. So it tends to be, and this panel is probably very representative of what the Australian cyber industry looks like at the moment, which is not right.
It's pretty much spot on.
Yeah, this is it. So with the panels, to be fair, we actually have made a conscious effort. So Melbourne, I think we were completely the other way. We made sure that we're trying to get that balance where we can. But in the industry itself, I feel that especially females, and the ones I know very well that are in the industry, make a huge difference. Just the way they see things and the way they're connected in with the way they think. Because cybersecurity is not just a technical thing. It's not someone sitting in front of a computer coding. There's the psychological part of it that's a very key thing as well. And if I'm a cyber criminal, I need to outsmart you. So that's actually sometimes more key than knowing how to use a computer. You can go on the dark web and, like a Facebook, Amazon marketplace, go and buy a kit for nothing. Pretty much go and do a ransomware attack or whatever and make a shed load of money. So it's not that hard, that part. But the diversity piece, let's look across that for a sec. Cess, I'll definitely start with you, and Adam can't jump in this time.
Thanks. Thank you. As the diverse person, I will answer this question. So I think the biggest impact it's having is twofold. One is on talent retention. Because at the end of the day, whether you look different, whether you're neurodivergent, when you're from a different background, it's just tiring sometimes. It's just tiring, and it takes a little bit of extra energy. And so some people in their careers, they're like, well, actually, maybe I'll do something slightly easier. And so we don't want to lose that, because as you're saying, we're trying to deal with some of the most complex issues of serious national significance. These are national security issues, and we need the best and the brightest, and we need diverse groups to solve these really complex problems. We know that diverse teams are better thinkers and they solve things better. We know this. So we really need to retain that talent and make sure that we do have diverse teams in leadership to solve these challenges and to inspire the next generation. And I think that's the twofold approach, is that we're also not being able to recruit enough people from different backgrounds, girls and young women, into the industry. So I think it's a twofold approach. ECU, wonderful Dr. Michelle Ellis has done some amazing work inspiring young women. We know we've got AWSN and WITWA. The WITWA conference is tomorrow, so if anybody's joining us, it's really a bolstering, wonderful moment. I think it's so enriching for women in the tech space, and to have that sense of solidarity. But we need to be doing things structurally in primary school and secondary school. And as you said, you don't need to be a doctor or a lawyer. You could be a cybersecurity specialist, and that doesn't mean you have to be a coder.
Which is better.
Exactly. And so I think there's twofold, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from other markets. And one of the things that I liked about RSA, and that I know we're having some other landing pads being developed to connect Australia, is that two-way communication. Because if you look to India, if you look to Indonesia, in terms of gender balance in traditionally male-dominant fields like cyber or engineering, they're leading us. We've got maybe, if we're lucky, 25% of the cyber workforce happens to be female.
It's actually lower than that, I think it's about 15.
And then if you look at first-year university students, it's lower again. So it's more like 1 in 5. That's depressing. And so there are lots of young women that we try and attract to things like Students of Cyber, a networking event. We always try and reach out and give that support, but it's not easy. And so I think we can learn from other markets that have had success in this space and see what have they done. Is it as basic as a quota system? Is it different communications? Is it, gender tech camps and summer camps and things like that? What are the other programs that we can learn from to improve the Australian cyber workforce? Because I think it's a huge risk. And I want my country protected by the best and the brightest minds, which means we need to have diverse teams.
Yeah, because Kylie Watson on the panel yesterday in Sydney has 2 daughters and a son, but both of her daughters were A students in coding, but just didn't feel comfortable in the class environment because it was a lot of guys, and they'd been doing it a lot longer. And she was saying that her daughter felt uncomfortable, even though she was getting A's, that they've been doing it longer than me, I just don't feel comfortable in this classroom environment, and dropped out. Doesn't mean they can't pick it up again or something, but it's those sorts of
It's the
aspects.
empathy piece, right? People often ask me, how did you get into cyber? And I tell my story. But then I remember I was 17 when I started first year university. If it's a 17% enrolment rate, do I want to walk into a class of mostly 17-year-old boys and be the only girl? I think it's those sorts of things. How can we make those spaces more welcoming? How can we think through an empathy lens and design something different to actually support the change that we want to see in the sector?
And what about two gentlemen here? You got
Tim, you should talk about your internship.
Yeah, I guess the approach that we took, I'm a middle-aged white man, I'll just put that on the table, but
I didn't know
I've
that.
got two daughters, and Stefan and I, one of the things that we built into our culture is that we want to encourage diversity, and the approach that we took is it's never too early to demonstrate that. Don't just talk about it, demonstrate it. So we've launched an internship for women, and we launched that at, I think it was Cyber Risk Meetup. It was either Cyber Risk Meetup or Students of Cyber.
Was it Students of Cyber end of last year?
Could have been Students of Cyber, and has joined us. She's doing great work. She's in second year uni and looks like she's well suited to moving into the industry when she finishes her degree, and she'll also have some skills, some useful skills for the business when she gets to that point. And so from our perspective on a grassroots level, it's been a case of how do we find the 20-25% of women in the industry so we can actually engage with them. So from what I've seen, the industry is willing and encouraging women, but it's hard to find them, frankly. I think there was another example of another meetup we went to, and Vanessa from Kinetic IT was there, and there was a student there who was introduced to Vanessa, and Vanessa was like, yeah, we'll come and join our internship. And it can be as simple as that. It's just putting the students together with the businesses and the Students of Cyber, and I can't remember the name of the other student program, but there's another one as well. And a lot of industry people attend those and are looking for these interns and grads.
I think having the role models there is a key thing as well. And women tend to, the ones I've known in cyber, undersell themselves. So I was with ASA before this, and I know with the board there this was the board, and very much, and diversity in where they were based. Most of the board were actually based in Sydney or Melbourne. But that's not diversity as well. If you're representing a national network of people, you need to have diversity across from the country there as well. But getting the young females, and they have the skill set. They talk themselves down and don't think they have the capacity. Guys do the reverse. I've probably only got 25-30% skill. I'll go do it. No problem. I'll learn on the job, whatever. So that's the other part we have to overcome is support and make sure. I said to them, I'll mentor you when you're doing it. So if you get stuck or you need any help, I'll mentor you. We just need to be supportive and actually help them get to where they need to get to as well. It's a key thing.
I think the average in our industry is about 10-11%.
Depends on how you count it.
Yeah,
I think
it's pretty low.
68% of all stats are made up.
Industry average,
You
that's
know.
right. So don't quote me on my stats of it. I think Red Piranha, where it fluctuates, but it'd be between 30 to 40%. And when we set the company up, some of the best experiences I'd had on online remote development groups had equal representation, or at least some representation in engineering, because you have an all male group in any business and it's going to be toxic. You have an all female group in any business, it's going to be toxic. So the best experiences I'd had over the last 30 years in engineering groups were balanced. So when we set up Red Piranha, I said I want to create this environment, and hence our industry participation is a lot higher than the average. So much so that there was a massive security engineering conference in Greece just the last few days. I was over at the B20, G20, and two of our representatives who were speaking at the conference were both ladies, females, and top engineers in their field internationally. That one of them has been working for us for about 5 years, and she's one of our best engineers. The other one that went with her, so this came up in, I think everyone's comments, was that mentorship. The other one that went with her was a grad, but she's been put with the other senior engineers in our organisation, and same with the rest of them that comes. And this creates an environment that's welcoming, because then you have that buddy system going on. They feel comfortable, and also they can see where they want to be. And it actually works out good for Red Piranha because it helps retain that talent. So what you're building is an inclusive environment as part of our core values. The other point we haven't discussed, but it's that inclusiveness of diversity. I think we have a representation of neurodiverse, something around the 7 to 10% in Red Piranha. And that was going back even when we had 10, 15 people in the company. I could start to see this trend evolving. I mean, just from my personal experiences too, knew it existed. So I think working with the STEM committee, there was a recent change to an apprenticeship program based off this experience. I think it was about to get knocked back by the committee that we're on, or not go through, and I myself jumped in and Microsoft jumped in and said, hang on, we've seen something different in the industry. We need a mechanism here to capture neurodiverse people at the high school level, to keep them in high school. Because if they're actually got a talent, but they're not fitting into the system, they'll end up, excuse anyone who is packing bags at Coles, it's not a, but they'll end up doing something that maybe they're not really suited to, but they just get comfortable in. If we can capture them at year 10, buy them, and then have a program in place, and so the whole mechanism has been built around this thought, have a mechanism which then holds them in year 11 and 12 to graduate high school, but is flexible enough to allow them to go down that pathway. Oh, yeah, it's a different syllabus, a different mechanism. They can then engage with business. They can then go to TAFE, ECU and do the diplomas, but there's a 5-year pathway for them to enter an organisation. Because I can tell you, when I went back and had to think about this myself, all those neurodiverse people that had joined our organisation were hired through non-conventional means. Every one of them. None of them went to uni. None of them had formal studies. I was just open enough as a CEO to get a comment from a network, a personal network, and say, have a look at this guy, test out the skill set and get them on. So we had to create a mechanism to better get that happening more formally.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. So we've gone off export and we've gone over time, which is surprising, but I'm going to get to Cecily just to wrap up and then you can go there if you like.
All right, I'll just from here. So thanks everybody, and thank you for, I guess, I'm always passionate about the diversity topic, so I'm glad that was part of our discussion. And I think it is an opportunity for us to both import ideas and export our brilliance. So in terms of from WA and the national perspective, I think one of the ways we didn't manage to talk about it closely, but thinking about the critical infrastructure and the unique skill set we have already and capitalising on that. I think we are looking at the emerging space industry. We're already world leaders in remote operations. So combining and partnering with other emerging industries and injecting our cyber capability into those spaces is a really strong way that we can export and actually be the global leaders that we are in those spaces. Really interested to see how that grows. We've talked about how having a technology product is easier to scale than a service, and that's something that we also have that IP here in WA. We've talked about the importance of local procurement, so I'm really proud to say that the WA Hub is working on this quite closely with the Office of Digital Government, with Minister Dawson's office, the Department of Finance, and Christine Tonkin, MLA, the member for Churchlands. So that's something that began before my time at the Hub, and we're really passionate about what we can do to foster that procurement locally. New South Wales have their 30%, which isn't always free trade compliant. So we want to do something here that really fosters that investment locally. And I think the trust and the investment from government also then builds that trust with the private sector. And so my dream or my hope would be that the critical infrastructure bill is something that we can use as an opportunity to build business locally, grow, and then think about commercialisation opportunities overseas. I've talked about the importance of talent retention and building those relationships, whether it's through a landing pad, whether it's through a trade delegation. We had a very successful delegation to India earlier this year. We know that RSA and San Francisco was really helpful to some of our cybers, so I was really glad that we had some WA cybers as part of that. Yeah, and I think it's about working together as an ecosystem, so just wanted to really reaffirm our gratitude for the support from the New Industries Fund, from the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Trade and Innovation. It's critical. The support from ECU and the ability we are to access their students and their facilities, I think it's really incredible. Then working with amazing partners like the City of Joondalup who give us so much support, and AustCyber. So I think it's that building of the ecosystem and that collaboration which can then, we can be our own landing pad and launch pad and head out elsewhere. So it's exciting times.
Did you mention Adam Bennett on that?
I didn't mention Adam Bennett or Tim Jones or Jason Murrell, but to my esteemed panellists, I'm really proud to be the 25% on the stage today. And yeah, I think that the future is looking really interesting for Australian cyber and particularly WA. So thanks, Jason, for moderating us.
Thank you, Cecily. Well done. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I mentioned before that we're going to conclude with the announcement of the Cyber Security Awards, and I'd like to invite Silvana Macri from Stay Cyber Safe to the stage.
Where's Adam? Did you want to join me? Is that okay?
Kaya people. Skill your people in cyber resilience. That was, I got asked out there, what's the message? You got one message you're going to get up, then we're going to talk about the awards, but for me, I work in that space. I think Jason spoke about that space, the behavioural science of critical thinking. CAR, because we love acronyms, is the new CPR. CAR stands for Cyber Attack Ready. You've had all the stats, but if I was to round it up, 100%, if I was to round it up, 100% of data breaches start with a person being compromised. And that includes, from what we've been told publicly, one of the recent breaches, people are our first and our last line of defence. BC, before COVID, I was determined to showcase the talented people we have here in the WA cybersecurity industry, a cross-generational pool of resources who are incredibly skilled, very busy at the moment. But what I got in terms of when we talked to them, went out there and spoke to them, was this little objection, this constant complaint that came from these people, and it wasn't about their pay, it was about not being recognised. It was about not being acknowledged, because when things are quiet and smooth, that means in cyber you're doing your job well. So then in late 2019, so BC, with much appreciated support from the City of Joondalup, it was an honour and a privilege to host the inaugural Western Australian Cyber Security Awards at Optus Stadium, another acronym, BTB, before the breach. Not sure we'll be back there. But part of the Cyber West Summit in 2023, we're back on board in March. Stay Cyber Safe is delighted to be collaborating with AustCyber, the WA Node, the Innovation Hub, and specifically the City of Joondalup. There are also expressions of interest opening for sponsorship very soon. I'm just saying to the government representatives for state and federal out there, and the rest of you who want to make a positive difference to our WA cybersecurity industry, appreciation is our love language. Now more than ever, we need to recognise our WA cybersecurity people, companies, agencies, SOCs, pen testers, GRC specialists who failed accounting at uni, students from multiple pathways, including VET, rookies, white hats, critical infrastructure, government staff, volunteers, and yes, women, because we are still underrepresented at only 25%. I think WA leads the way, so it's less in other states. 25% of the workforce here in WA. And the neurodiverse, we actually work at Stay Cyber Safe with a few. I want to call out Lil, stand up. So Lil Pallison, I'm a mentor for women in cyber. She's my current mentee. And she just, this time last year, she was doing her ATAR exams. She's registered next year at North Metro TAFE to do a Cert 4 in cyber. And she was hanging around the B-sides and the technical conferences, and I said, come to these conferences, come to the other side at Network. And she's woken up early, which if you just did your ATARs, that's a hard thing to do. So thanks, Lil, for being here. She's the third woman I've mentored who has gone on to a successful role. We also work with NDIS providers for the neurodiverse, and I've got amazing people. One particular guy, Brody, who was a games designer who now sits and analyses logs, loves looking at patterns and things like that. So there's so much work out there. We need you all. So next year, March, the next 2023 Cybersecurity Awards, be part of it. Even if you're a small business and you've got an MSSP, did I get that right? A managed security service provider. Okay, nominate your people, acknowledge your people. Acknowledgement is our love language. And lastly, skill your people in cyber resilience. Back to you, James.
Thank you. So just a reminder, thank you again, Silvana. 8th and 9th of March, the Cyber West Summit, that's when the awards are going to be presented. I sometimes get a feeling when we talk about cybersecurity here at Joondalup that this must have been what it felt like if you were standing in the dunes at Kitty Hawk at the beginning of the last century. Because I guarantee that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we'll look back and think of this and think how small it was then and how big it has become now. I wanted to leave you with that thought, because if this city's about anything, it's about ambition in the future, and that's why we fit so well, I believe, with the emerging and vital cybersecurity industry. Thank you for all of our panellists and speakers today. Thank you for sitting through half of your morning, enjoying breakfast, networking. We've talked a lot. We have one more thing to ask of you, and that is when you get the event survey from my team at the City in your inbox, do not treat it as spam. You can trust it. Please fill it in straight away, because if you're like me, you'll either answer it straight away or you won't answer it at all. And give us the feedback we need, we crave, so that we can make the next event, the next time we all get together, even better and more effective. Thanks to our partners, thanks to AustCyber and WA AustCyber Innovation Hub. Remember, stay safe, have a great rest of the week, and thank you again.